Hey folks, I'm Andy. Welcome to Gaming Indoors, a channel dedicated to helping you explore, potentially design your very own games indoors. Today we're going to be talking about notes and note-taking as a game designer, something that I think is crucial. We're going to cover very quickly the why, the what, and the how. Why do we take notes? Well, keeping notes on games played is a really useful way of building up a store of useful game mechanics that you can use later when you're designing your own games. Now, the challenge for me has always been, what should I actually detail? What should I record when I take notes? That's the hard bit, and so I'm going to come to that last. I am now going to jump to how I capture my notes, and that's pretty straightforward. I live off my phone. My phone is always within 2 or 3 foot of me, and there's a great app called OneNote that I'm sure everyone's heard of. I think Evernote is the same sort of thing, but that's what I use. There are occasions, however, when I do still use a little notepad and pen, and that's usually at night time when I'm trying to stay away from my phone. I'll grab a pen and I'll do some doodles in that. That was the why and the how. Here's the difficult bit, the what. Now, I have for a long time tried to create a video that describes accurately everything that you need to record in order to be able to capture the key elements of any game. And I failed. Thankfully, there are much brighter and more experienced people out there whose shoulders I think I can stand upon and create a really useful approach. And that is what this video is actually all about. It's about creating a set of 10 simple questions that I can run through to capture all the important elements of any game I wish. Now, a couple of things to stress. Firstly, this is my own approach. No one else I know is doing it in this particular way. You, for example, may have a completely different view in what you should be capturing and noting down for design purposes. And if you do, well, you know what to do. Drop me a comment below and let's have a little conversation about it. I love learning stuff, especially for people who are out there actually doing. The second thing I want to stress is that I lent heavily on the book, The Building Blocks of Tabletop Game Design by Jeffrey Engelstein and Isaac Shalev. Now, I've recommended this book before and I'm going to do it again. It's a really useful book. It's full of very technical detail about the mechanics of games and what's used to make them up. But it's a great reference point for any budding or aspiring game designer, I think. Okay, on to the questions. For each one, I'm going to go through the question and then I'll give a quick example of how I think it's going to be answered by me. Question 1. What interactions take place during gameplay? Now, this question pertains to player interaction, but also a little bit about game structure. This question is probably going to be answered by me saying something like, this is a cooperative game, or this is a competitive game, or this is a legacy game, or this is a solo play game, or that there is conflict in this game and it's indirect, or that there is conflict in this game because it's competitive and it's direct. How does the turn order work? I think this is almost going to be a drop-down kind of response. I'm going to say it's a standard fixed player turn. The first person will always be the first person, such as in a game of Snakes and Ladders, or I might say it's a bid structure, or I might say it's a role-based structure. But I don't seem to think there's going to be much variation here. But again, it's a useful thing to capture, I think, to describe the game. Now, the next 2 questions relate to actions. The first is, what can a player do each turn? And the second is, how are actions resolved? Now, I'm going to squeeze one more thing into the first one here, which is I'm going to mention any game events that players have to react to in this bit as well. So what can a player do? Well, the kind of things I'm expecting to write here are roll a dice, take a card, use up an action point, move a piece. Again, I'm going to write down all the things that a player, I think, could potentially do. I might reference here as well any actions they can take that specifically inhibit another player, because I think that's probably a good mechanic to recognize in a game. As for how actions are resolved, I think the kind of responses I'm going to put down here are a description of, say, a voting mechanism, or I might talk about a card play or a dice roll mechanism. Again, all that will be captured in how things are resolved. How does the game end really refers to victory conditions as well as what triggers the last turn. So here I'm talking about whether it's a race type mechanism, where it's the first person to a certain number of victory points, for example, or whether it's a deck finishing or a number of rounds passing, or whether it's player elimination. All of these things I think I can categorize under that term. Where do luck and skill come from in the game? Really, this is a question about the uncertainty and how it's introduced into a game. We know that a game without uncertainty isn't really a game, so you have to have some level of uncertainty. But have things that are too uncertain and it doesn't become an enjoyable game. One of the reasons Snakes and Ladders sucks so much. So one of the things I want to capture is exactly where the uncertainty comes from and how it's balanced. Now, examples of how I would describe capturing the uncertainty might be I have to rely on my memory in this game, or I have to use hidden information. What's slightly more difficult to rationalize is how it's balanced. It may well be, and this will come from playing the game a few times, I think. Hopefully I'll be able to use this question to remind me to recognize what it is that's in place to ensure that a particular character isn't overpowered, or a particular activity or action in the game doesn't spoil the mechanics of the overall game as a whole. How playing pieces are used doesn't just refer to the actual deck of cards or pawns or meeples that I'm using. It also refers to the playing area. So here, for example, I might talk about a modular game board. I might talk about a sort of card draw or deck building mechanism in terms of the card mechanics. I might talk about dice stacking rather than rolling, or rolling a particular number of dice or a particular sided number of dice. So there's a bunch of things I could put together on how the actual meeples or the playing components are used within the game. There may be something very novel. I think Mayan calendar uses a very novel kind of element in the board makeup. That's the kind of thing that I would want to know just for reference to make this game kind of different from any other game, for example. Now, not every game is going to use movement, of course, but many games do. Obvious answers here are things like roll a dice and move. So roll and move as a mechanism might be recorded as an answer. But I also want to capture things like hidden movement, or whether or not I've had to take out a tape measure and actually measure something because it's a war game type game, and the movement is based on literally the unit moving a certain number of inches across the board. The point is, I want to have a reminder that if there's movement involved, how is it managed? Question 9 is how resources are used in the game. But actually, when I talk about resources, I'm referring not only to inanimate objects like fire, wood, gas, or even sheep. I'm also talking about currency and worker units, worker placement units. So if there's a worker placement, mechanism in there that I find of interest, I want to make sure that this question reminds me to check it and write down a few notes about it. Similarly, currency or resource, whether it's traded, whether it's sold, is there a marketplace involved? Is there an auction? If there's an auction, what kind of auction is there? So again, this one question should trigger off a number of thoughts that I can go through and check. Now, my last question was kind of an outlier. I didn't really have anywhere else to put it, so here it is. Does the game use sets or patterns? So the kind of answers I'm looking for in this question are things like, is there a set collection? Am I joining two areas on a board with a particular sort of pathway? Is there a route or a path I need to find? Am I collecting, like I said, cards or tiles of a certain type? Yeah, set collection. Well, folks, that's another video over and done with. I hope you found it useful. If you did, please do give me a little like on the buttony there, because it will help spread this message a little further afield. Now, if I've missed something out, or if you don't quite agree with what I've put, I will first of all say this was meant for me, but if you don't find it useful, or if you think I've missed something more importantly, please let me know in the comments below. Again, this was a set of questions that I want to use to make sure I capture all the key elements, anything that makes the game special, so that I can store it away and use it again later as inspiration for my own game designs. And I hope that maybe you could do the same. Well, until next time, folks, take care.